Welcome to Distribution Talk with Jason Bader, the show where we dive into the stories, struggles, and solutions from business owners and thought leaders in the wholesale distribution market. Hey, podcast listeners, Jason here. In this episode, I had the opportunity to catch up with Marshall Jones. Marshall is the former owner of Marco Supply Company based in Roanoke, Virginia, with locations all over the Southeast United States. Marshall and I go back at least 25 years, and frankly, he's one of the smartest distribution guys I know out there. I thoroughly enjoyed catching his perspective on things, and I hope you will too. This episode of Distribution Talk is sponsored by InSequel Distribution Software. InSequel is a fully functional distribution-based software package. I say distribution-based because that's important. Many alternatives out there say they do distribution, but they really aren't very good at it. They're generally watered-down manufacturing packages with a few distribution features tacked on. I only recommend software packages that were purpose-built to serve distribution, and these folks do it very well at a price point many smaller distributors can afford. If you're ready to step up to a fully loaded, scalable distribution package at an affordable price, look no further than InSequel Distribution Software at www.insequel.com. That's INXSQL.com. All right. Hey, Marshall, thank you so much for joining this show. I appreciate you taking the time to speak with me today.
Oh, really happy to be here.
As you know, in Distribution Talk, we like to take folks way back to the beginning. Why did you get started in distribution? Why did you jump into this fancy world of moving stuff in and out? What was the beginning like?
Well, I was lucky enough to be born into it, and from a very early age was involved with the family's business to the point where I think I was 6 years old when I first started repackaging nuts and washers on the weekends. So my earliest memories are wrapped around distribution and product. And, they were almost games that we played with the power tools and the powder actuated guns and other tools that we had back in the warehouse, as kids. So as far back as I can remember, I was involved with distribution.
Yeah, it's funny you should say that. I always like to say that my dad broke a few child labor laws to get me involved in the business really early. And, and you mentioned that those powder actuated tools. I mean, I'll tell you, for a little kid, finding a 22 powder actuated load, man, that was big fun right there.
Absolutely.
Putting that out on the train track and see what happened. Deviant stuff like that.
Absolutely.
So you spent, I would assume you spent some summers and worked in the family business, and then eventually you decided to make a career of this thing.
That's right. When I was a junior in high school, I decided that the family business was the business I wanted to enter. Upon getting through college, I shared that with my father, and he suggested that if I was serious about being in the distribution industry, that I should look at an education that would help me. And as a result, we went down to Texas A&amp, toured the industrial distribution college there, and was fortunate enough to be accepted into that program. Went away long ways from Virginia, where I had grown up, but very thrilled to be at Texas A&amp and be a part of the distribution program there.
So you were exposed to a lot of what we would call kind of the gurus of distribution down there. Who are some of the folks that you really looked up to, gravitated to, some of the things that you picked up out of that program?
Well, sure. It was a wonderful introduction to the distribution industry, on top of the summers and weekends that I had worked in the family business. Being able to relate to what they were sharing was very valuable. But the way they presented was incredibly entertaining and useful. And you could just tell that they had years and years of experience wrapped up in the information that they were sharing with us. And some of the folks there, Dr. Don Rice was the head of the program at the time. Michael Workman was one of the professors that shared with us an introduction to industrial distribution. We had several professors there that have left Texas A&amp and went on to start industrial distribution programs at colleges like Purdue and others throughout the country. So really, it was a good time in the mid-late 80s there as far as the faculty that was present, as well as what they were developing and learning. Really some cutting edge stuff for distribution, moving into a kind of a new era in industrial distribution. I was very fortunate to be there to be a part of that.
The folks that you went to school with, did the majority of them go into privately held business, or do they tend to gravitate to larger entities? I mean, where did most of your cohorts wind up?
The vast majority of them went into distribution. I would say probably a third went to manufacturers that sold through industrial distribution, especially in the electrical and fluid power transmission industries. There were a lot of manufacturers that would recruit through Texas A&M, but a lot of large distributors would come, the national chains, as well as some kind of big regional powerhouses throughout the Southwest.
Gotcha. I did not go through the industrial distribution school there, but I have a lot of respect for it. And I've seen a lot of, really, great people come out of that. I've also, obviously met several of your professors over the years through speaking engagements. And it always struck me as a really kind of a fun group to be around, and sometimes you think about courses of study, especially something as potentially dry as industrial distribution. These are pretty good folks. I mean, they were kind of fun. I mean, look, Don Rice and a whole lot of whoop,
Yes.
Got a lot of whoop in that guy.
That's right.
So.
He was an Aggie through and through. That's for sure.
You graduated, you left it, and then on to the family business. So how did you take, some of what you learned and try to apply? Was it a difficult fit? I mean, I know sometimes in academics, it's difficult to take that academic learning and apply it, to a smaller business.
Well, I was fortunate to make a pit stop along the way in Denver, Colorado, with a wonderful distributor there based in Omaha, Nebraska. The name of the company is Carlson Systems. And I was a outside sales rep for about a year with them before heading back to Virginia to be a part of the family business. That year was kind of the post-grad work that came about from Texas A&M. I was able to try a lot of the things that I learned. They gave me a tremendous amount of flexibility. They had recruited me through Texas A&M, so they were wide open to putting all the things that I had learned to use. So the things that worked really well, I was able to come home and be a hero. And the things that didn't work out all that well, I didn't have to look so foolish in front of the folks back at the family business. So that year was a wonderful start in the industry. I was given a territory with 2 customers, and my goal was to leave with 102 customers. So I had my work cut out for me, and it was a great year of knocking on a lot of doors and learning a lot of lessons about the sales process and how the relationships are formed between distributors and the customers that they work with. So fantastic time there, great leadership and mentorship that I received while I was at Carlson Systems. And then I came home and tried to put what I had sucked out of Carlson Systems and what I had learned from Texas A&M to use within our own family business.
So speaking of that, I'm glad you brought up that time, that year with Carlson Systems. This is something that a lot of our distribution friends out there in our cohorts that have kids coming into the business have asked me, how do you get your kids into the business? Should I send them away for a year? Should I get them right in out of college? And so there's kind of a debate back and forth, or really a question. It sounds to me like this was a hugely valuable experience for you to leave the family business for a year, spend some time with somebody else. Could you talk about that just a little bit?
I think it's fantastic. And I'm so grateful to the folks there. I mean, obviously, it's difficult for an employer to look at an individual that has the ability to go back into a family business and risk that hire that they may not be with them for an extended period of time. So I can understand why an employer would be apprehensive in making that kind of a hire. I was so grateful that Carlson took a chance on me. I feel like I got a lot more out of the experience than they did. I feel, still guilty to this day about that. But I do feel like it's a risk worth taking for those employers. I think that the things that they learn from an engaged employee can be very valuable to their business. And from the kid right out of school's perspective, it was incredibly valuable. And to see so close inside the operation of another distributorship, to kind of learn that there's not just one way to do things, to be able to kind of see some of the struggles that you're going to encounter going back into your family business. It's an incredible experience. It may be something that, today there's a tremendous amount of internships available. Back when I was in college, there were not so many of those. Distributorships were not quite there as far as providing internships, looking for interns, but it's so prevalent in colleges and universities today to work with companies to develop these internship programs and to funnel their kids through those, that you probably could get some of the same kind of experience through an internship that I was able to receive just right out of school. The difference, I think, though, was I didn't have a net, so to speak. I think a lot of times in an internship, you feel like you have a net. It's 3 or 4 months, you're right back to school. This was trial by fire. I was thrown to the wolves, and that was probably the best way for me to learn. And for any owner of a business whose children are currently in college or about to go away to college, if there is an opportunity to get them to spend some time outside the family business, ideally, I would think inside the industry, but not necessarily the exact type of distributorship that you're involved with, it pays huge dividends that your kids are going to come back so much more prepared to be a part of your team than they would otherwise.
Yeah, I've seen the difference between those who went out and spent time elsewhere and those who went directly, right into their family business. Sometimes when you go right into that family business out of school, you don't get that broad exposure. You're still, very myopically focused on the practices inside of your family business. And I think your point is right. I mean, it'd be great to get them into some sort of distribution organization, but boy, some of the folks that I know, you and I both know that you have been really very successful. I mean, remember one of our friends spent time selling mainframe computers,
Right.
for 6 years before he came back into his family business. Another one was a currency trader. There's been some other folks that have gone off and done other businesses and then come back to the family business with this wealth of experience, coming in. I just can't stress it enough. And I think that's just one of those big deals.
Well, there's a tremendous amount of pressure that's put on that family member that comes back into a family business. I mean, all eyes are definitely on you as you enter that business. So the more prepared you can be, and I think you get a pass. If you worked in the summers as a high school kid, I think your future employees are willing to give you a pass on that time. But once you get back into that business, you've got to really be able to hit the ground running.
And I think also, not only for the employees, who are watching you, have you seen you grown up since you're a little kid at family picnics and things like that?
Right.
Also, I think it's a tremendous confidence builder. For me, at least, when I left for a year and went overseas, I proved to myself that I was actually able to support myself and make a living without the family net or without that family bank account, that I could actually go out and provide for myself. And if all things, went bad, I could actually go get a job and I probably would be relatively successful at it. So yeah. I think it was just a nice confidence builder for me as well.
And you need that confidence. In growing up in a family business, you don't always get that. You're constantly being judged every direction you look. And, you're not always able to do exactly the right thing as a young kid. So bringing that confidence back in, bringing that experience back in is huge in your ability to take off and be productive within your business.
Absolutely. So you came in and really started reshaping your business. One of my earliest memories of meeting you was, some of the training that you were giving these new hires. And so could you speak a little bit about that?
Sure. I was fortunate to be a part of a multi-location distributor when I came back in. So my father had built out a network of locations, but we were excited about the opportunity to fill in some spaces, some holes, creating the opportunity to hire new folks and give them opportunities within the business. So as a result, we didn't have a pipeline of folks ready to take that next step. And we went out and we recruited. We didn't have industrial distribution programs locally. So we found folks through a variety of resources. But as we brought them on board, we felt like it was important to give them some of the same knowledge that I had acquired at Texas A&M. So things like understanding how you make money in distribution and the functions of a distributor and the value that we bring to our customers and to our manufacturers that we represent. That was all important knowledge that I don't think is just generally available to kids that get a business degree or a marketing degree in most colleges. So we focused a lot of time and effort on helping our new folks understand their role in the distribution channel, as well as, learning product knowledge and application skills and being able to listen better to their customers' needs, as well as sales techniques specifically for distribution that make you more effective in creating value for your customer. And it was very helpful in getting a relatively large number of people up and running and much more successful early on than what we had experienced in the past.
Yeah, I mean, again, if I recall correctly, wasn't it a 12-week program or something like that? I mean, it was a long program. It wasn't just a little weekend deal. It was
Right.
there were some hours put into this thing.
Absolutely. And as we grew, we would try to learn the most important things and constantly improve the process. And as it was refined over a long period of time, it was generally a couple of weeks back at home base with other new hires that were getting up and running. And then they would go off and have, whether it's a few days here and there or weeks here and there in different disciplines within the organization, they would spend time throughout before they transitioned into a sales territory. So we tried to get them just as comfortable with the organization and the operation as possible before putting them into the field. And it was, that's an expensive undertaking. I mean, you can't pause paying them, but it was worthwhile.
Yeah, speaking of that return on investment, I mean, I think about the gentleman that I met, John, again, that multiple years ago. I can only think that type of investment that you made led to a lot of his longevity. I mean, John was with you the whole round. I mean, I think he stayed with you for a long time.
Yeah, he certainly was. From relatively fresh out of college, he had one job outside of college before starting with us, unrelated to the distribution industry, and had a wonderful succession of responsibilities within our organization, from an outside salesperson to a branch manager to an area manager and ultimately a regional manager over multiple locations, and was a very, very valuable piece of our organization.
Yeah, I think going back to the point that really that investment and that ability to promote from within, I think that's a very attractive thing to a lot of people coming into an organization, is that, hey, we try to promote from within as much as humanly possible. But I think the investment you're talking about really leads to much greater retention over time.
I absolutely agree. And we try our very best to find candidates within our organization as well to expand their roles and their opportunities. With that said, not every individual within an organization is cut out to be successful in every role that there is inside of an organization. So, what we found is in situations where we had an excellent operations person or an inside salesperson, perhaps, moving them into a role of outside sales was not the right way to grow them within the organization. But instead, if we were able to bring more outside salespeople into the organization, that we would be able to give them greater sales volume for them to support, and as a way, grow them, their ability to make more money within the organization, as well as be responsible for more things within the organization. So, we didn't always move people around, but we always worked to try to create more opportunities for folks along the way.
Speaking of that, trying to kind of the old Jim Collins, get the right people in the right seats in the bus. You employed a lot of testing. You were a strong believer, if I recall correctly. Tell me how that played a big part in this retention and getting people in the right place.
Right. For us, selection was extraordinarily important. I mean, we never got to 100% success. I'd love to find a company that has that and bottle it and be able to sell that. But the process was constantly evolving, constantly being refined. And we found that testing was a huge part of that process. It really helped us get past some of our internal biases as hiring managers. We would make mistakes that the test would not make. And by putting faith and trust in these different forms, the more trust we put, the more success we had. So you still have intuition and you have your assessment of how they do at these different pieces of the recruiting process, but utilizing pre-employment testing, whether it be aptitude-based or personality-based, we were huge proponents of it and felt we got a tremendous amount of value out of it.
Yeah, most of the folks that I know who go down that trail, they love it. At this point, they look back and say, how could we live without this? So there's a lot of folks that have difficulty, jumping into that world. There's a lot of naysayers, that will say, what if somebody doesn't test well? Do you exclude them? And it's like, well, I don't know.
I think that you don't want to set somebody up for failure. So you're not doing yourself or your company or your coworkers a service by bringing somebody in that's just not going to enjoy certain aspects of a job or be competent to be able to handle certain aspects of a job. So if you can avoid those from the get-go, it's certainly a whole lot less expensive to spend more time recruiting than it is the time of lost productivity and replacement. Those costs are astronomical next to kind of getting things as right as you can get them on the front end. So, I would always counsel to find those tools that work for you, that help you replicate the success that you're having with certain employees. Then once you find those tools, incorporate them and trust them and use them consistently. As we look back on hires that did not work out, it was more often than not, almost exclusively, because somebody just pushed the test results aside and said, I really like this person and I want to put them in this role. That was almost the kiss of death for somebody's ability to perform. We learned those lessons and they were painful lessons, but we got better and better at it as we went along.
Yeah. Now you said both you had an aptitude and then more of a behavioral down the line. The first one was a very basic test. Can you kind of describe what that looked like? And that was a pre-employment screening, is that right?
Yeah, we would do all the testing pre-employment. Now it gave us not only good insight as to their ability to handle that particular job, but I think it also gave us some ideas on a career path and certain opportunities moving forward for some of the folks that we hired. We kind of knew what seats on the bus they could sit in and which seats they would struggle in. So as opportunities presented themselves down the road, we were able to use the knowledge we had gained through the recruiting process. But you're exactly right. We used a variety of tests. On the aptitude side, it was a relatively simple and quick test to take. When we first started, it was on paper. As we, through the years and technology improved, it was an online assessment. Take less than 10 minutes for the prospective employee to complete. And it gave us a score that would translate into what we would believe is kind of the ease at which people would pick things up and how much time they would require to master certain aspects of their position. And if it was going to take a long time for them to master data entry or learning the sales process, we knew that they would become frustrated in those roles and generally not perform well in them. So it helped us understand a baseline of aptitude level for folks to succeed in the job. So that was very helpful, very inexpensive, very quick, a great filter that we used. The personality one, and there's always a lot more argument over how accurate those personality tests are, but we found one that was relatively simple to administer, relatively quick to process, relatively inexpensive, and we felt like provided us good, accurate feedback on the candidates' personality traits, what they were comfortable with, the types of roles that they would shy away from, the type of roles that they would embrace, and we used that to really help us identify folks that would be good natural fits for different roles within the organization.
Yeah, it's one of those. Something you said earlier, it's, putting someone in a role that they're not going to be successful in. I can just think over the years, how many inside salespeople that they felt like they had to jump into that outside selling role because that's where the money was. And, we lost a phenomenally productive inside salesperson, and they went out in the field and they floundered. And then it was really I don't know if it's too much of an ego hit or what it was, but it was very difficult for them to come back inside where they were really where they best belonged. I think, to me, if I look back, that was one of the greatest failures that I had, was just not being able to provide that environment for someone to really match their skill sets better.
Well, I absolutely agree. And I feel like part of that is some of the paradigms that are involved in distribution. And fortunately, over the last 20 years or so, I think that a lot of those paradigms are shifting. When I started back into the business, the outside sales force, they were the superstars. They were the heroes. They were the hunters. They were the ones that brought in all the business for the organization, and they were revered, and thought of as so integral to the success of the operation. Little praise was heaped upon the inside sales force that supported them, or the delivery force that made those promises that those salespeople made come true. So we over time, I believe within our organization and distribution as a whole, the value of each role within distribution has become more and more recognized by management internally throughout the organization. And everybody sees just how important every piece is to the puzzle. And, I think that salespeople do a fantastic job of accomplishing the tasks that they're given. With that said, that none of what they produce out there can really come to fruition without the support of a wide network of folks within the organization.
Let me change tacks here for a moment. At a relatively young age, you bought your family business. And I mean, you were one of the youngest guys I knew that, wound up making that transition. But then you also retired at a younger age too. Tell me, what was that like, buying and then building and then eventually letting the company go? Bittersweet?
It was a nice long run. Fortunately, by starting early, I could finish early. I purchased the business when I was 26. So I was young, relatively short time in the industry, but felt very comfortable with taking over the reins and purchasing the business from my father. And we had a very smooth and comfortable transaction, and it worked out well for the entire family, and I believe ultimately for the organization as well. So, I bought it at 26. I sold it at 43. And in between, it was a nice long run of growth. We had a couple of hiccups with the economy along the way, but for the most part, we were able to kind of continue moving forward and building an infrastructure that was able to support more and more customers and more folks internally. So it was a great run. It was early on both sides, but it kind of creates an opportunity for a what's next.
So speaking of, terrific segue right there. You retired for a while and then now you are back in the game. Tell me about why and what are you doing now?
Well, I'm extraordinarily happy to be a part of the distribution team. As I was leaving the industry, I knew I had certain obligations to be away in order to satisfy the terms of the sale of the business. And I was certainly very comfortable with those and wanted to make a clean, clear break so that none of the folks that I had worked with over the years ever felt like I was doing anything that would impede in their ability to be successful. So I stepped away for about 5 years, was fortunate to be able to find some really neat things to be a part of during that time. Got an association up and running, built a house, worked in some land development, and met a lot of new folks along the way, and broaden my experience set and some of my skills that I'm really pleased about. When that obligation was fulfilled, it was a very easy transition in my mind to the idea of working with distributors to help them succeed. I was blessed to have a tremendous amount of success within our organization. I also was blessed equally to have encountered a tremendous amount of obstacles along the way. I think I learned as much about how to be successful in distribution from the problems that we encountered as we did from the successes that we had. So I'm excited to share the experience that I've gained over a long education and work experience in distribution. I was very fortunate to be a part of several trade associations and marketing groups along the way where I was exposed to a large number of distributors and learned lots of different ways to be successful in this industry. And the idea of sharing that knowledge, bringing value to other distributors, manufacturers, and ultimately end users as well along the process is very exciting to me.
Well, great. And, thank you, Marshall. And I'm truly appreciative that you decided to reach out and call me and say, hey, Jason, can I come and help you out on this little endeavor with the distribution team? And I think it's going to work out famously. Again, listening to, your story and your experience, I mean, there's just so much there to share with other distributors out there. I think we've kind of come to the end of our segment here. I want to kind of keep these relatively short, bite-sized pieces here. Is there any one big piece of advice you would say to any distribution business owner? What would be the one thing that they should really take a hard look at?
I think it's a little different with every individual. I'd love to say there's one silver bullet that will solve everyone's biggest problem when it comes to distribution. But unfortunately, every company, while there's some general similarities amongst companies, they're all unique, and they're this coalescence of personalities and processes and people and customers and suppliers and all these kind of pieces that have to be put together. And if you can put all those pieces together just right, it's an amazing business to be a part of. So I think everybody needs to look at their business individually. There's not a single way to do it. It's been proven out in this industry time and time again that there's so many successful companies that operate in such different ways. However, we all have room for improvement. We all have room to grow. And I think if I could give one piece of advice is be open to those resources around you, whether they're peers within your marketing groups or your trade associations, or they're outside folks that can come in and help you. Be open to what they bring. Look for those opportunities to improve your business. There's ample resources available if you just be open and look around you.
Thank you for listening. If you liked what you heard, consider hitting that subscribe button. Links to sponsors, products, and services mentioned during this episode can be found in the show description area on your podcast application or at www.distributiontalk.com. Distribution Talk is edited and mixed by Andrea Klunder and Edwin Ruiz at the Creative Imposter Studios. This episode was brought to you by my company, The Distribution Team. We are a consulting services firm dedicated to helping wholesale distribution clients remove barriers to profitability, generate wealth, and achieve personal goals. To learn more about how we can help your company succeed, check us out at www.thedistributionteam.com.